Good evening, all. Welcome to our third session of low carb weight control. I hope everyone is feeling fit and well, but cold. It is cold today. I'm feeling cold. We're going to start off with our Om and then pass it on to Caroline. She'll kick off the session then for us. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. Gosh, can you hear the wind from my window with the bells? So far, this is, as I said, this is our third session. So far, I am feeling really great because I've been following the diets and everything. Only yesterday, I did a cheat. I had a slice of pizza. Sorry, only one slice.
We'll forgive you.
Otherwise, I've been really, really good. And even my daughter was surprised that I've been following it. And I feel great. I really do feel great. I've not been craving.
Good.
I am feeling a teeny weeny for the chocolates, but I'm still controlling myself.
Good.
Really good. So hopefully, I hope everyone else is feeling like me, bubbly, happy, and up and about. So can I invite you, Caroline, to start off?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll share the screen in just a moment. So that's great. And thank you. It's lovely to see so many of you here again for week 3. And it is a very difficult time of year. I think February is a horrible month when, you know, it's still middle of winter. Any year it's a horrible month. This year it's even worse because we turn on the televisions and all we've got is doom and gloom. So it is very tempting to go for those comfort foods. So the trick is, as you learn a new approach to food, is to find your new comfort foods. And you can still have chocolate as long as it's dark chocolate. So I don't know if have you tried 80% yet, Panna?
I have.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Well, start on 70% then with a small amount. And as you start finding you're thinking that's okay, then gradually increase. The shops have got a nice variety now. So from 70%, you can graduate sort of up to 80. Because 80% we feel that really doesn't give you too much sugar, and a square of 80% chocolate is actually a really good way of quelling those munchies that you might get. Oh, look, Amanda's saying that she already loves 90%, you know, and that does happen. If I have milk chocolate now, I hate it. It's horrible. And yet I used to be Mrs., you know, buy one of those giant bars of Cadbury's Dairy Milk and scoff it all to myself. So, you know, I think, Dutch is saying as well that, you know, they've graduated up to 90%. And now even if they 85%, they find it too sweet. So it's actually heard somebody the other day describing it a bit like giving up sugar in your tea or coffee if you drink it. The first couple of weeks, really, you have to kind of keep at it because you really don't enjoy the drink. And then suddenly one day you realize you have enjoyed it. And if anybody puts sugar in your drink, you think it's disgusting. And that's exactly the same process as weaning yourself off these sweet snacks. So you've just got to start little and often. Don't beat yourself up about your slice of pizza either. We know we all have bad days. The most important thing is to think, well, that was yesterday. Today I'm back on it again. So without further ado, I'll get through today's slides. And as always, folks, if you'll put any questions or comments in the chat box, and we'll do our best to talk through as many of those as we can. So I'll just share the screen now. I'm going to slides show. So week 3 of hoping that you're all enjoying real food. Just again, the disclaimer to say I'm here to give you advice, but it's not medical advice. Please make sure you're consulting with your medical advisors if you are diabetic and making significant changes to your diet, or indeed if you're on blood pressure tablets and you've made significant changes, it might be well worth checking your blood pressure and checking in with your doctor in case you need to alter any medications that you might be on. So we're on week 3, and the aim for this week was to talk about the third of the important macronutrients, as well as a bit about exercise. But because we got quite a few questions last week around vitamins, I'm just going to introduce the topic of vitamins and talk very briefly about calcium and vitamin D. But next week we can do a bit more on that. And next week the aim is, because after next week we're going to have a 2-week gap for you to go away and really get on with this, and then the WhatsApp group will always be there, but we'll come back in week 5 and hopefully you'll have lots of questions. So the aim really from after this week is that it'll be less from me and more of a chat and discussion and sharing of ideas and experiences. So hang on in there. But this week, as I say, I'm going to go into the macronutrients and talk about protein. So protein, actually, the word comes from Greek meaning in the lead or standing in front. And that really gives the relevance to protein. It is the most important constituent of our diet in the terms of proteins are the building blocks from which every cell in your body are made. And we need protein. It's absolutely vital to our health. Children, babies and children need lots of protein because of all the growing that they're doing. And then gradually, as we finish growing, we continue to need protein, perhaps not quite as much, but we continue to need it throughout life to maintain our bodies and our muscles and keep everything working well. As we get older, we naturally lose a bit of our sort of muscle mass, etc. And therefore, it's actually important to slightly increase our protein as we get older. Whereas there's a tendency if people's appetites deteriorate or they've develop very bad eating habits, they're not getting enough protein as they get older, and that can exacerbate the normal aging process. So as we get older, it's really important to look at our protein. And I think probably protein is the biggest challenge for vegetarians and particularly vegans, because a lot of the protein sources are animal, or the easier sources of protein are animal, but we'll come to that in a mo. So there are about 20 amino acids that are the various different components of protein. 9 of those amino acids are absolutely essential. We need to get them from food and we need to get them regularly. The others, we can have variation and they're a little bit more accessible from plants and so forth, but it's really, really important we get the 9 essential amino acids. And as I said, we need every cell in the body needs protein to help it to continue to function properly. Protein also takes a lot longer for the body to break down and digest, so a decent amount of protein on your plate is also going to help to keep you full. So when you're trying to adjust how you eat, and again, I think for a lot of vegetarians and vegans, you've relied a lot on the higher carb foods as your fillers. So you need to learn how to replace those with protein and healthy fats, and that will keep you full. Oops. So, as I said, the easiest sources of protein in the diet would come from animal foods. So if you're not eating those, you really need to be looking at the other good sources. And for vegetarians who do eat eggs and dairy, then they would be your go-to sources for your best protein. If you're vegan, then you're really depending on the better plant sources of protein, and some of the best are quinoa and tofu, amaranth, buckwheat and spirulina. You need to watch those. Some of those are very high carb. So it's learning to feel your way around the different good sources of protein and try and choose the ones that have got the best protein and the least amount of carbs as the mainstay. It doesn't mean you can't eat the others, but as your mainstay, you want to be trying to get that balance where the protein is more dominant than the carbs. Things like rice and peas and rice and lentils and hummus, they are all good sources of protein, but there are carbs there. So we, peanut butter sandwich will have quite a bit of protein in it, but also quite a lot of carbs. And obviously we're not wanting you to be eating the bread these days unless you're making good low carb bread. So this is the area I think for vegans is particularly challenging, and where you really need to do your research and sort of look at your favorite foods and find out which ones are going to be the ones that you can continue to eat in larger quantities and which ones perhaps you need to rein in and try and eat less frequently. With an awful lot of nutritional guidelines, a lot of it, we have sort of national recommendations, and I was quite shocked to find that a lot of these are fairly randomly achieved by just people talking and, scientists getting together, and there isn't necessarily any hard evidence. So you will find a huge variety of advice about how many grams of protein a day you need. A kind of good rough estimate is a gram per kilogram of body weight. So obviously it makes sense that a little tiny 5'0" lady needs less protein per day than a great big, gym bunny bouncer that's, what I call a triangle with massive shoulders and big muscles. But we all need a baseline to keep us maintained, as I say. So aim for at least a gram per kilogram of body weight. So that means if you weigh 75 kilograms, you should be aiming for 75 kilograms protein. Now, that's not 75 kilograms per se of a protein containing food, because foods are made up of lots of constituents. So you need, again, to use something like that Carbs and Calories book or app that I mentioned previously, that gives you breakdown of not only the calories, which we're less interested in, the carb content, but also the protein and fat content of each food. And it's a really useful tool for looking at normal portions and then working out how much protein is in those foods. So I've put on the screen here some of the common sources of protein for vegetarians, and obviously if you leave out the cheese and the eggs, then you've got the ones that vegans can eat as well. Cereals there are, if you look at any NHS thing about protein, they'll bang on about the fortified cereals and so forth. And of course, we don't want you eating those cereals on a low carb diet, because they're just pure sugar basically. So they may be fortified with various bits and bobs nutritionally, but they're also packed full of refined carbs, and they're not going to do you any good at all. So you need to be looking at good sources of soya. I mean, obviously, again, soya can be from a decent source, or it can be very cheaply produced, and certainly many soya products can be very highly refined. So be careful of your sources. Nuts in their whole form are one of the best sources, because there's less interference gone on with those. Beans and pulses do contain protein, but do remember that they have got quite a lot of carbs. The ones that have the highest fiber content will be the slower digested ones, and therefore the ones that will release less of that sugar into your bloodstream. So they're the ones to aim for. And obviously, if you're vegetarian and you eat dairy and eggs, then they are really, really great sources of protein. But do remember the dairy also has some carbs in them. So again, you need to be just watching the balance that you're getting. One of the things that we want you to do, obviously, is eat less carbs, but there are more and more alternative flours to straightforward wheat flour, and hemp is a very, very useful both seed and flour for vegetarians and vegans to use, because it's got very high protein content compared to carb content. It's got 30 grams of protein per 100 grams and only 3 grams of carbs. Lots of fiber in there as well. Also contains a lot of really useful vitamins and minerals. So hemp is quite a useful product to use, both, as I say, in its seed form and in its ground form, to help supplement and get more of those really good nutrients into the system. So that's something that I would encourage you, if you don't already use it, to look at. Adds quite a nice flavour to things as well. I'm talking about flavour, again, you may well be aware of this, but nutritional yeast, I'm not talking about the yeast that you actually stick in the bread to make it rise, but this is a yeast that you can either get in powder form or in flake form, and many of you may already know about it, but it's also got decent protein content. The thing is with this though, that you wouldn't use huge quantities in a batch of soup or a stew, but you can sprinkle this on salads and on all sorts of dishes to add a bit of flavour, and it gives a sort of cheesy flavour to things. I love it in all the soups that I make where I'd naturally add cheese to. So for vegans, it's a great way of getting a kind of cheesy flavour without the cheese. But again, it is absolutely packed full of vitamins and minerals. So even a few tablespoons into a bowl of soup is going to really add a lot of value and nutritional value to that dish. So if you're not already familiar with nutritional yeast, I would highly recommend it. You'll get it in all good health food stores or good old online retailers now. I do a lot with Buy Whole Foods online. It's a good online retailer and you get really good quality foods such as this. So it's quite easy to get hold of. So protein is the last of the three macronutrients. So we mentioned carbohydrates, fats and proteins. Those are the three big macronutrients, and carbs are the one of the three that are non-essential. Very important you get fat, naturally occurring fat and protein in your diet every day, and preferably at every meal. But as important and hidden away in all foods are a variety of vitamins, minerals and trace elements. And we're really only learning now how desperately important many of these are. And if we eat a really good wide variety of whole foods, real food, we should get all the nutrients we need. But if we are a bit faddy with our diet, or we only eat certain things, then there is a danger that we might get less of some than we need. Some of the vitamins are fat soluble. So you'll only get those in foods that contain naturally occurring fats, most of them the animal fats. And some vitamins are water soluble, and a vitamin such as vitamin C is not only water soluble, but it doesn't get stored by the body. So you need to be taking in a source of vitamin C every day. So it's really important to have balance throughout your diet throughout the week, and try every day to have variation in what you're eating so that you've got the best chance of taking in all these different nutrients. It's the nutrients work better in our bodies if they're coming in food, because what we're learning about a lot of these nutrients is that they work sort of mutually together. So, you know, if you've got vitamin D and calcium, which I'm going to talk a bit about, they need each other to work properly, and they work more effectively when they come in the diet. If we have a diet that for whatever reason is lacking in certain foods, then we do need to supplement. I'm sorry, I've been distracted by a typo in the bottom box here, so I do apologise. Thought I checked it over. So quality of the food is essential, and there is concern, it should say, that modern farming methods may lead to depletion of these substances in our food. So yes, with industrialisation of farming, and I'm talking about vegetables and plants as well as meat farming, we are concerned now that overproduction and quality of soil and so forth is getting reduced, and therefore we may not be getting as much nutrition from food as we think we are. But if you buy well, buy the best quality food you can manage and have a great variety of food, on the whole, you shouldn't need to supplement. But as I say, if you have got a diet that does lack certain types of food, then it's worth sort of being aware of what you might be missing out on and considering supplementation. And that there's no vitamin more important than vitamin D when it comes to that, and I'll come to that in a second. So vitamins are substances that have been identified in sort of the last century or so. We've become gradually more and more aware of vitamins as an element of food that are vital to our health. And they're simply lettered, identified by a letter as they've been discovered by the scientists. So there's no magic about whether it's an A or a C or a B or a D. That just happens to be the order in which the scientists have recognized that vitamin and realized where we get it and why it's important. So far we've got vitamins identified from A all the way through to K, and no doubt to say there'll be more discovered as the scientists get more and more clever about being able to examine all the little intricacies of our food. And as I mentioned, some are fat soluble and some are water soluble. Many vitamins and minerals work together. And this is something that, again, I think we're just learning about, which is why it's so much more important to get them in food, or if you do take supplements, to take the supplements with a meal, because they are going to be metabolized by the body all as one, and you will get a much, much better effect from them. So vitamin D, I was asked last week about calcium. Well, you can't talk about calcium without talking about vitamin D, because they work extremely well together and in fact don't work terribly well without each other. And vitamin D is something that we are worried about in our part of the world, because unfortunately the most important source of vitamin D is sunshine. In the fat just under our skin, there are mechanisms that help to convert that sunlight into vitamin D. And vitamin D, we used to think this was the one that's all about bones and teeth, which indeed it is. Children who don't get adequate vitamin D as they're growing develop rickets, which is the soft bones that bow because there's not enough strength in them. And one of the main reasons why that's happening is because without the vitamin D, the calcium can't be properly absorbed and the children's bones aren't growing nice and strong. But all of us need vitamin D to maintain our bones and teeth. However, we are learning more and more about how important vitamin D is for supporting the immune system. And there's been a lot of really convincing evidence to show that people with a very low vitamin D level are many of the people who've done less well with the COVID infection. So it's been finally recognized that vitamin D has an important function in the immune system as well. And the NHS are now supplying vitamin D to certain groups of people as a supplement. But really the advice is that all of us should take a vitamin D supplement in the winter time, because our winters, you know, we have such short days in sort of the time of year we're at now, and so little exposure, and it's so cold. I mean, it was sunny here today, but there's no way you'd go out without, you know, only your eyes visible, because it was so cold. You were so well wrapped up. There was no way that sun was going to impact your skin at all. And the other problem we've got is that people with darker skin respond less well to the sun, so they need more sun exposure to develop the vitamin D. So they're even more likely to have low levels of vitamin D, even in the summertime, particularly if culturally your mode of dress when you're outside is covering a lot of you up, which is fine. That's your culture, but it does mean that you're going to be even less exposed to the sunshine. And therefore there is something to be said for people who live in the UK, particularly in the years when we have pretty rubbish summers, that you should be taking a vitamin D supplement all the year round. So it's probably the only vitamin where there is a consensus throughout the scientific and medical world that supplementation is probably a good idea. And you need that adequate vitamin D to absorb the calcium and phosphorus that you take in your diet to give you those healthy bones and teeth. So you could be taking all the calcium you like, but if your vitamin D levels are low, your bones and your teeth are going to suffer as well as your immune system. So vitamin D is incredibly important. The only dietary sources of vitamin D are mostly in oily fish, some in red meat and eggs. So again, if you're vegan, you are simply not going to be getting vitamin D readily from your diet at all. And if you're vegetarian, it's the eggs that will be the most important food for you. And again, through winter, you probably need that supplementation too, because that's not going to be sufficient. So vitamin D, incredibly important, but it is the one vitamin where we possibly need to supplement. current advice, as I say, is that we'd all benefit, but they are actually prescribing it for older people, and various groups of more at-risk people can get it through their GPs. So covered that. Calcium, best sources of calcium again are in the dairy products. So if you're vegan, you are missing out on these. If any of you do eat meat or fish, then the tinned fishes such as salmon and sardines, where the tiny bones are included, they are quite good sources of dietary calcium. But for vegetarians, then it will be the dairy products, particularly milk, yogurt and cheese, where you'll get your calcium. There are some good plant sources though. And green leafy vegetables such as broccoli, cabbage and okra, not so much spinach, but actually kale, which isn't on this list. Kale's quite a good source as well. Fortified unsweetened soya, rice and oat drinks, but again, watch those, look at the packets because some of them will have sugar added. But if they say on the side that they're fortified with calcium, great, but unfortunately if they contain sugar, not so great, so choose carefully. Some of the set solid tofus have got a good calcium level as well. The nutritional labels on the packet will help you to see. Sesame seeds and tahini are quite a good source. Almonds are particularly good for calcium, and especially the almond butter, because that's, you know, really concentrated, so that's a very good source. And pulses do have some calcium as well. So check the labels on the packet varieties of those foods, and make sure. We want you to be eating lots of green leafy vegetables anyway, because they've got so much other nutritional value, but broccoli particularly is good, and cabbage, which are very much in season at the moment. So calcium wise, you're probably not doing too badly, but you need that vitamin D to help that calcium to do its job properly. So the NHS recommendations for vitamin D are only 10 micrograms or 400 international units. Unfortunately, vitamin D is one of those vitamins where in different parts of the world, they use different measurements for it. So most of the supplements that you can get hold of will give you both quantities on the label. Most of the functional medicine physicians around would tell you that that is way, way too low, and you need a lot more than that. But we don't recommend going above 4,000 international units. So probably somewhere around 2,000 international units is a good amount to be having every day, particularly through winter. And you can drop it back a bit in the summer if you are able to get out and get the sunshine. The recommendation for calcium is about 700 milligrams, although again, I see a variation in recommendations if you look at some of the nutritional experts who suggest up to about 1,000 milligrams. Now, calcium is one of those nutrients that we shouldn't overdo, because we can get calcium buildup in the wrong places, such as in our blood vessels. But you'd have to be going fairly nuts with your calcium intake to really do yourself harm. And as I said, you should be able to get that in your diet as long as you're getting your vitamin D, so that the calcium can actually get absorbed. So those are the current recommendations, but I would personally recommend a lot more of the vitamin D than the NHS baseline recommendations. So we talk about eating a rainbow. In order to be sure that you're getting adequate nutrients from your food, you need it to be as diverse as possible. If you eat the same thing every Monday and every Tuesday and every Wednesday, you know, you are not going to be getting that variation. We need to be a bit brave from time to time and try new things. And it's great now with the internet that you can Google recipes and, you know, maybe find something that you can put in a recipe instead of something you always use, particularly if you're trying to find lower carb versions of some of the foods that you like. You might find some new ones that actually turn out to be pretty good. So try to eat as diverse as you can. Try to eat seasonally. Again, better for the planet if we're not flying food from all over the world. And also the nutritional value of the food will be much greater if it hasn't been sitting around in refrigerated wagons and aeroplanes and everything else. So if it's only come up the road from the local farm, those vegetables are going to have far more of their nutritional value still there for you to absorb than if they've been hanging around for weeks on end. Cooking for the water-soluble vitamins is important as well, so cooking in as little liquid as possible. That's why I love to saute all my leafy vegetables now, or bake them in the oven. I very rarely boil a vegetable. If you do boil vegetables, then you need to try and keep the cooking water and use it in your soups, because that's where all your water-soluble vitamins are, and we have a tendency to chuck them all down the drain. So really important to think about the cooking of vegetables as well, to maintain their nutritional value as much as possible. I've had another look online, and there are lots of good resources for recipe ideas for vegans and vegetarians. I've just put a few there. Diet Doctor I really like, because there's an awful lot of nutritional information as well as recipe suggestions on that website. But I found a few more that are on this slide, and we make sure that these web links go onto the WhatsApp page for you. So it's a matter of really experimenting, and once you get a bit more used to which foods are better to eat in larger quantities, you can tweak some of your favorite recipes and make some substitutions, and there's no reason why you can't still have a lot of your favorite type flavors. It's just learning which foods are going to be better for you. So I'll just move on before I stop for questions to make a quick mention about exercise, because we talk about diet and lifestyle, and I am very, very keen to point out that you don't have to be doing what the person in the little picture here is doing. When we talk about exercise, we're not talking about hours spent on treadmills or lifting great big weights and so forth. There's all sorts of different ways that you can exercise, and I must say again that you can't outrun a bad diet. So when we talk about exercise, we talk about it as being an important entity in its own right for a healthy life, but it's got nothing to do with weight loss. Now, if you can build good lean muscle, that muscle will be more efficient at burning the energy that you eat. But it's impossible to lose a lot of weight simply by exercising and continuing to eat badly. So it's really important we have the two things as two separate elements of a healthy lifestyle. But exercise is vital for health, and it's a question of building that in to suit to your own circumstances and your own physical abilities. But it is important that you build some exercise in every day. So it's essential for a healthy body and mind. Lots of different ways of doing it, and it's not all about going to gyms or strenuous workouts, even if we could go to gyms at the moment. But what we discover when we look back through history is that man has developed by mainly walking, occasionally having to run, and back in the days when he had to catch his own food or run away from enemies, and occasionally had to lift heavy things. And that's what our human body is designed to do, mainly at a leisurely pace, but active. And what an awful lot of us do these days is sit a lot. And all of us, I'm sure, that are here tonight will know that if we sit for any length of time at all, be it in front of the television or in front of a computer or whatever we're doing, you're stiff when you get up. And that's because we're not meant to be sitting for hours on end. We are meant to be quite active. The Primal Blueprint is a blog written by a chap who studied this in great detail, and he sort of talks, about sort of primal way of thinking about exercise, and the same message as I've just said really is move frequently at a slow pace, lift heavy things. Obviously we don't want you to give yourself a hernia or injure yourself, so start gently with lifting, but just think about how often do I lift anything? Am I really putting my muscles in my arms through much of a workout? Because mostly it's my legs that are going up and down the stairs, it's my legs that are walking around. What am I doing with my arms to keep them fit? And then again, I'm not suggesting you all start running 100 meters, but thinking about increasing our heart rate by maybe walking a bit more briskly. So when you're out for a walk, most of it's at a leisurely pace, but every now and then, maybe between a couple of lampposts, try and up the speed a bit and get that pulse rate just going a bit faster, so that our heart is getting that little bit of a workout as well as our muscles. So that's the way that man is meant to be. I'm a great believer in setting an alarm. Most of us got smartphones. Quite a lot of us wear things around our wrists now to tell us how we're doing with our steps, etc. And they can be set to give you a little reminder on the hour every hour to move a bit. And even if you stay in your chair, but you wriggle your toes, you move your legs, you wave your arms around, anything that just gets you moving a bit more rather than just being static is going to be good for you. So simply, you know, getting up and going to make a drink. If you can't walk well, as I say, just doing a bit of fidgeting about in your chair, using tins of, you know, tin foods and things as sort of mini dumbbells to do a little bit of arm raising and things, just anything to get a bit of blood flowing and a bit of movement in all your limbs. If you want to get a bit more keen about it, there's a lot of things you can do at home. Don't involve a huge amount of money, and so you don't have to spend any money. You could just use the tins out of your cupboard. If you get your milk in those plastic bottles, particularly the 2 litres or even better the 4 litre ones, and fill them with water, they make great dumbbells, you know, and you can start practicing with just lifting those and seeing how you go. YouTube is absolutely full of wonderful videos of workouts from beginners level, chair-bound people, you name it. Whoever you are, whatever type of person you are, you'll find a YouTube video with suggested exercises that you can do at home. The pictures on here just give you an idea of different types of resistance bands. All the research shows that resistance exercise now is really, really good for us. It's not all about running, as I say, being on treadmills, on bikes and that sort of thing. Particularly as we're getting older, keeping our muscles strong is the best way to stop losing muscle mass, as well as eating that healthy diet with enough protein. But what resistance exercises do is they strengthen the muscles around the joints, so that helps to protect our joints, make us less likely to have fractures. Apparently, when you are exercising and those muscles are pulling on the bone, that, you know, that they're attached to, because all muscles will ultimately attach to a bone somewhere along its length. When it does that, that in itself is triggering activity in the bone to help strengthen the bone. So you're not just exercising your muscles, you're strengthening your bones as well. And this is important for all ages, but it's particularly important as we get older. So just a couple of examples there of people doing all sorts of really good exercises just with simple rubber bands, different types of rubber bands, and the links here on this relate to the different types of equipment that they're using. And there's been some nice experiments done to show that actually you can achieve just as much with these as you can with those sort of dumbbells and kettlebells that you see the gym bunnies with. So don't dismiss them as a sort of, you know, just a poor excuse for the people that go to the gym. These are really efficient and effective at improving your strength. I've got some of these light resistance bands for my very elderly parents, and they sit in the chair in the evening, they promise me, doing their arm raises and stretches and put them around their ankles and pull their legs apart, and, you know, because they're, you know, pretty much housebound at the moment because of the COVID situation. So it's helping to at least maintain a little bit of muscle mass. And that's it for me. So I'll stop sharing. And I hope that made some degree of sense. And have we got lots of questions now? So Davina, have you been able to keep an eye?
Yeah, there's not, I mean, if you have kind of answered the questions in the chat box, but you know, people are asking about where to buy some of the foods.
Yeah, I mean, I hate promoting Amazon.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Unfortunately, it's really, you know, it's often my starting point. But what I tend to do with Amazon is I look to see who the retailers are that they're using, and then I try and find out if they've got their own website, and then I kind of go direct to them. That's how I found Buy Whole Foods online, and they're really good. I mean, Holland and Barrett's do have plenty. So if you prefer to go into a shop and you've got a Holland and Barrett locally, you'll get an awful lot of the stuff. They tend to have an ear to what's trending and what people are looking for, and therefore you'll usually find it. They may not always be the cheapest though. So some of the online retailers will be more economical.
Yeah,
and anybody that goes
even go to farmers markets and things like that just to get different foods.
yeah, in normal times, you know, farmers markets and so forth are a great source. So, and certainly things like the resistance bands, Amazon is again a place where you'll find all of those, and you know they start very cheap, so you do not have to spend a fortune, but they just give you perhaps a bit more variety than the household items that you might start off with. But if you want to start getting a little bit more keen and achieve a bit more, then the resistance bands are the next level. A lot of physios use resistance bands in a lot of the remedial work that they do, recovery work and so forth.
Amanda's saying some of the supplements, the good ones that she uses is Love Life supplements. They're very clean, and Primal Living as well. They have supplements.
Yes, I use Primal Living a lot because the chap that runs Primal Living is actually he's become a sponsor for Public Health Collaboration. He's really into clean, as you say, very, very keen to avoid any kind of toxicity or any nasties in any product. So, and his vitamins actually are extremely well priced.
Steve Bennett. What's his name? Steve
Bennett.
Yeah, because he's doing that fast, isn't he? The five days.
Yes, yeah, he was one of the ones that did the walk, the 100 miles in 5 days, fasted, but he's also currently, if you follow him on Twitter, he's currently doing another 5-day fast at the moment. But he's very keen, and as I say, he's also got very good ethic in terms of his products are very pure and, as I say, very reasonably priced, and you know, pretty efficient delivery.
Yeah, Amanda's made a good point that some of the vitamin D contains sunflower oil. So
yes,
Primal Living do vitamin D, which doesn't have any sunflower oils. It's good to keep an eye on, make sure what are the additives they have in the vitamins.
Like anything that you're going to swallow these days, you need to be looking at the container and looking at what's in there, because some of the cheaper vitamins can have fillers of all sorts, as well as being using the wrong oils and so forth.
Yes, Smitha was asking about the vitamin D and K2, whether you have to have it together.
Yeah, I mean, vitamin D, well, you should be taking K2 at the same time. You can buy a lot of vitamin D products that are combined, but I mean, I currently take a multivitamin that has K2 in it and a separate vitamin D because I want more vitamin D than is in the multivitamin. So, you know, you can, but you're right, K2 is important as well. I think we're learning more and more about all the different things that complement the different vitamins.
Yeah. I mean, obviously things like sleep are important for you as well.
Yeah, we're going to talk about sleep. Yeah, I was going to talk about sleep next week a bit more. I mean, the whole lifestyle thing, the food is one bit, but the exercise is the other important major thing that a lot of us have stopped doing because our modern lives have us, you know, going out and about in cars, sitting at desks, sitting in front of the television, and therefore we've become much more sedentary than the human being was ever meant to be. You know, I used to kid myself until I got a Fitbit that I was busy in the house, but it's pathetic the number of steps I do if I don't actually make an effort to go for a walk. And even though I think I'm running up and down the stairs all the time, I don't actually run up and down the stairs anything like as much as I kid myself I do. So, you know, I think we have, because we've got all sorts of equipment now that help us with the housework as well, we're nowhere near as energetic as our parents would have been, even doing things like the housework. So we do need to work on building in exercise, but it doesn't have to be. I forgot to mention that the good news about resistance exercises, we only need to be doing a couple of minutes per muscle group. So, you know, if you're working with your arms, your legs, your core, which is the bit down the middle, so sort of any exercises like squats and things that involve both the upper and the lower body, we only need to be doing a couple of minutes for each of those muscle groups a couple of times a week to see a benefit. So it's not like you're having to do hours and hours of exercise day in, day out. It's building it in so that it becomes a habit regularly, and it does make a big difference, and it does help our mental health. Somebody saying, as housebound, I've bought a vibration plate that I can attach resistance bands to. Yeah, so that's Amanda again. You're doing it all right, Amanda, I have to say. Big thumbs up to you. but you know, it's easy to make excuses and say, oh, I can't get out, I can't do this, I can't do that. But actually all of us can build 5 or 10 minutes a couple of times a week in to get a little exercise routine going, as well as moving as much as we can throughout the day. And I say, even if it is just to go and make a cup of tea, go and put the kettle on and stand and maybe think about doing some squats or some, you know, standing with your hands on the worktop and raising your heels off the ground and then going down and stretching and, you know, just doing things for that 5 minutes while you're waiting for the kettle to boil and waiting for the tea to brew. That's 5 minutes that, you know, you'd otherwise be possibly not doing anything or dreaming or going on Facebook or something. Much better to use that time to do some exercise.
I don't think there's any more questions. I mean, obviously, as vegetarians, you know, we are going to be lacking some of the nutrients. So.
Well, you shouldn't be lacking too many if you are eating, but the problem is we all get into a rut, and that goes for those of us that eat, you know, meat and fish as well, is that, you know, it's very easy to get into a rut of some tried and tested recipes that you like, and particularly if your life is busy and you know you can whip up very quickly, and sort of almost having a weekly routine of what you eat, and that's going to limit the variety of foods you're having, and therefore that will limit to some extent, particularly if you're missing out a major group such as meat or fish or both, and therefore it's working hard at planning and trying to experiment, try new things, and just get that variety in.
There's Smitha wants to get some clarification on carbs. She's put, can you please ask about carbs, as I am confused? Body still needs some carbs and we do need to eat them. Can you please clarify?
Right, well, I'll let you have a go in a minute, Tatcha, but I'll just say we don't need carbs. Our bodies can get as much energy as it needs from the fat that we eat, and if necessary, some protein that we eat. Carbs don't offer a huge amount of nutritional value at all. And unfortunately, most of the, you know, if you eat a good plant-based diet with plenty of naturally, you know, occurring plant foods, there will be some carbohydrates in those plants, and that is enough. You don't need to eat carbs as carbs, such as bread, potatoes, the pasta, and the modern rice, which is highly refined. They just simply turn to sugar in your system. Yes, they'll give you energy, but as soon as you've used that energy up, the metabolic effect they've had will leave your body worse off than better off, and you're much better getting your energy from the fat and the protein that you're eating. So I don't know if you'd agree with that, Datsha.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. You know, vegetables, like you said, do contain carbs. It's unless you're a carnivore eating just meat and animal proteins, you're going to have some carbs in your diet. It's impossible to avoid. But like you said, it's more the processed carbs and the potatoes mainly, and the grains. Yeah,
the grains are the foods that with the modern grains, because they're so highly refined, you might not think they're refined, but they have been. The whole agricultural system has bred the modern grains to be much more refined than grains our forefathers would have eaten. And they've lost all their nutritional value. So you will get adequate energy from whole foods that are, you know, the plant-based foods that we're talking about. Obviously, if you're vegan or indeed, you know, fairly strict vegetarian, you will need to eat some of the sort of pulses and beans and things that have got a fairly significant carb content, but they are better for you than the grains because they've got a really good bit of fiber in there as well, and on the whole they take a lot more digesting, and they will feed your gut better, and the carbs in them will be released more slowly and therefore won't have that same damaging spiking effect on your blood sugars. So you absolutely do not have to have obvious carbohydrate in your diet. That's an urban myth created by the food industry. And yes, it is blatted about all over the place, but it is not true. You will get adequate nutritional value, including energy, from a whole food diet.
mean, there are lots of flours available now anyway.
Lots of alternatives to wheat
Like
flour.
what you said about the hemp flour. I hadn't heard about the hemp flour, so that sounds good.
Hemp, well, yeah, I mean, it's not as commonly used at the moment, but hemp seeds they're lovely to add. I make crackers, seed crackers, with a mixture of sunflower and pumpkin and all sorts of seeds, but put some hemp seeds in, it gives another sort of nice bite and a different flavor. And the hemp flour, you know, say can add more and more nutrition as well as more flavor to things that you're substituting for wheat flour. But almond flour, coconut flour, very useful as alternatives to wheat flour. The gluten, you see, because of the nature of the flours having changed, because they've become refined over the years, there's more gluten, and our guts, you know, obviously we know celiac. People with celiac disease can't tolerate gluten at all, but actually most of us can't tolerate the amount of gluten that is in modern flours. So it's wheat flours, so it's much better to get away from that as much as possible.
It is the quantity that we're eating, really, because I mean, I think there's Dr. Pearl Mutter who always talks about the grain brain.
Yes.
So you're eating a lot of grains, and that's
Yeah.
causing havoc in your
yeah, and unfortunately, you know, the dietary guidelines that changed in the late 70s and the 80s that we've been eating now for the last 5 decades even, have been very, very wheat based. And the idea of breakfast cereals and cereal and toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, it's just, you know, wheat or cereals all the way through, and our guts were never ever meant to have that amount. Oh, and certainly not the kind of refined nature that they are now. And we will talk a little bit, possibly not next week, but certainly before the end of the 6 weeks, about fasting as well, which I know in many of your cultures you naturally do. But you know, making use of that and trying to apply the mentality that our bodies are not meant to be eating constantly. So one message I would like to get for picking up anybody sort of saying they're feeling a bit hungry, or, you know, if you're feeling hungry between meals, you're not eating enough. If you eat enough of the right foods, you won't feel hungry between meals. And I think a lot of people, when they think about going on a weight loss diet, think that the plate has to look half empty. And it doesn't. If you've got the right amount of whole food with good amounts of protein and healthy fats, eat until you feel satisfied. But you do have to learn about what feeling satisfied is. It's not feeling stuffed, as many of us have learnt with the modern sort of approach to food, is to just sort of keep chomping until you're kind of bloated and you feel you can't swallow another mouthful. You will learn, a bit like learning about the chocolate that we were talking about right at the beginning, you will start to learn that actually feeling satisfied is a different sense to feeling full. But it's all a learning process. But if you really are finding that you cannot go between meals, then you haven't had enough of the right food at the previous meal. So just look at what you had and increase the quantities a bit. I mean, in another group I'm doing, I had a great chap who's about 6'3", and he's a big chap, and he was only having 1 boiled egg at this lunchtime. Well, that's not going to do him any good. He could have 3 or 4 boiled eggs, but because he's been sort of brainwashed into thinking eggs are so bad, he didn't think he dare eat 2 or 3 or 4 eggs in one meal, but that's absolutely fine. So it's learning to have enough nutrient dense foods at each meal, and then you won't need to be going for those snacks in between. And if you do in the early days have to go for snacks, then try and make them things like nuts, or if you do eat eggs, a hard-boiled egg's a great thing to have in the fridge. It's much better for you than a handful of biscuits or crisps or something, and it'll get you through to the next meal. But you will gradually adjust. But please, if you are feeling hungry, it's possibly because you're just not having enough of the right foods at each meal.
There was a question which I've answered about grains.
Yeah.
Somebody said, should we not be eating grains? So I said in the chat that I don't eat grains, and it's okay for people to keep grains in the diet, but you've really got to think about, can you swap those out and have something with more nutrition on your plate? So it's all about, like you said, eating a nutrition and dense, nutrient dense even, nutrient dense
And looking at the different grains, because some will be slightly better than others. So, if you're weaning yourself off, then try and say something like the Carbs and Cals book. I think I showed you all this before. It's quite useful because it gives you the breakdown of the different foods. So you can see which ones have got more protein, more fiber, and go for those rather than the ones that have got a much higher carb content. But keep trying with vegetables to substitute the grains, because Dacia and I both eat a lot of cauliflower rice now, and you can make the cauliflower rice. I will put the link on again for the little videos that our community chef for my other group is now putting on YouTube, and they're free for anybody to watch. And he's done cauliflower rice as well as the almond bread. And so they're only 3 or 4 minutes, these little videos, but you start to learn to substitute those grains. And I'm perfectly full now after a nice curry on cauliflower rice, or shredded cabbage underneath things that I would once have put pasta or rice under. It's a bit of a psychological thing that you've got to have these things. If the curry is made with good quality ingredients and lots of flavour, the rice is an extra. You can do without it. Psychologically, you think it's essential, but you will learn to enjoy the food without it. And certainly with good substitutions, such as using cauliflower and broccoli. I often do a mix of those two as a rice, and that's quite nice, more colourful as well, but very tasty. Roasted cauliflower or roasted, sorry?
I think people have been trying those and they've said it's good.
Yeah, roasted cauliflower and roasted broccoli are delicious as well. I toss cauliflower in a bit of turmeric and cumin and olive oil, and then bung it in a moderate oven for about 20-25 minutes, and it's all lovely and crunchy on the outside and gooey in the middle, and it's delicious. So I'll often do that, and that's what I have. My husband might have a potato because I can't wean him off his potatoes. He's not diabetic, he's not overweight, so I've run out of excuses. So he'll have his baked potato and I'll have my roasted cauliflower, and I'm perfectly happy with that.
Yeah, there's questions about millet again, whether that's good. There's a question about sweet potato, if that's good for you.
No, funnily enough, sweet potatoes have got just as much carb in them as white potatoes, possibly a tad more fibre, but they, again, if you're vegan and, you're not getting the energy from meat that those of us that eat meat are, occasionally something like a sweet potato will be okay, but I wouldn't have them on, as part of my daily diet. I sometimes stick a sweet potato into soup. I make a lot of butternut squash soup, and obviously it's going to be several portions, so I might stick a sweet potato in for a bit of extra flavour, and per portion is going to be a lot less carbs than obviously if I was eating that whole sweet potato myself. So use them sparingly, but they are basically high carb. Millet, I'm afraid, is.
Amanda said that shelled hemp seeds are lovely on top of Greek yogurt. I've used shelled hemp seeds, and they are
they're very tasty.
They are very
and I say I chuck a handful. Now the recipe for these seed crackers that I've got doesn't include them, but since I've discovered them, I chuck a few in those.
Yeah, you can even put it on salads as well.
Yeah.
Kirtibai is asking about zinc and magnesium supplements. Are they good for you?
Well, again, it all depends. It's very difficult to answer individual questions about those because, I don't know what you're eating a lot of or not too much of, and they are important. And zinc has been identified again as something that's very important for our immune system. So all I can suggest is that you look up, it's very easy to look up the sources of the individual nutrients in your food. And if you feel you don't eat a lot of the foods that are the best sources of those minerals, then maybe a supplement would be a good idea. I'm not anti-supplements.
I take magnesium because of my headaches.
Yeah, I'm not at all anti-supplements, but it is important that people don't just take supplements instead of eating well. It's, I appreciate if you're vegan and there are certain food groups that you're just not getting, then supplement is certainly better than going without. but we need to try and get as much of this, because there is good evidence to show that your absorption of these nutrients is better from real food. But supplements are there as backup if we feel we're missing a particular thing, or you're going through a particularly bad time. And as I say, the vitamin D in our climate is, unfortunately, really important for all of us, but particularly if you're not getting your food sources of vitamin D.
Can I just add that supplementation is something you should really check out with your doctor if you're on any medication.
Yes.
So please don't just think, I'll just take magnesium, because depending on what medication you are, it can interfere. So please, speak to your doctors.
Speak to your doctor. And also, if you're buying them from reputable sources, they should normally have something on the packet as well that says, either seek advice or do not take if. But unfortunately, some of the cheaper brands may not say that. But I agree, Dacia, it is important that, if you are on quite a lot of medication, that you check with your doctor.
Or the pharmacist.
The pharmacist should be able to advise you.
Yeah.
If you're buying them in a pharmacy, or you're going in for your prescription and say, I'm thinking of taking this. Because they've got access to good databases now where they can cross-check interactions and so forth.
Yeah.
So as I say, I'm definitely not anti. I mean, I'm taking supplements myself at the moment. Certainly, I'm taking vitamin D and zinc and things. Anything I can that I think might help with preventing COVID. But it's still the most important thing is to get it from your diet, and we'll get it from our diet if we buy the best quality foods that we can afford. So I buy organic when I can, and also the variety. We really do need, there's about 200 vegetables that are readily available to us. And how many of us actually think we eat 200 different vegetables in the course of a month? Probably very few of us, probably struggling to maybe get to 30. So, there's a huge variety out there, and we all need to be a bit more adventurous, I think, and try and build in more variety. You wanted to say something, Dacia?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in any of your other sessions, are you going to touch on organic food like the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15? I'll just put links up if you're not.
If you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be good.
Do you want to just speak a little bit about it while I find the link?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Carolyn, people are asking about your cracker recipe.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I'll put that on as well. The recipes I'm talking about have come out of the Caldese book, which I don't think I've got it on my desk at the moment.
Has got some as well.
Yes, there's some really good recipes for things like crackers on Diet Doctor, but there's the diabetic cookbook that I use quite a lot is by the Caldeses, who he's a chef and she's I think she's pretty much a chef herself, actually, but she runs cookery schools. They're of Italian origin, but they live in the UK. And he developed diabetes, and they discovered how to reverse his diabetes with low carb. And because of their background, they have produced a wonderful cookbook that's got some great recipes in it. So I'll put as many of them on as I can. And as I say, the little YouTube videos of our community chef doing some of these recipes, I'll give you the link for those as well. And
there are some questions about flours and things. I think the best thing to do is look at the back of the packet and find out what the carbon content is, and I'll give you an idea of,
No, semolina, they're all going to be, unfortunately, they're all flour-based, wheat-based.
I need to ask you about rye crackers. I mean, I wouldn't buy any crackers really, because
the recipe that I've got for the seed crackers and the almond crackers that I make fairly regularly, our family prefer now to any of the over-the-counter crackers for going with cheese or homemade pâtés. So I've forgotten where I got the almond cracker one from, but I'll post it. So I'll do my crackers and the Caldese book.
I think somebody's made some nice almond flour bread, which they're going to share the recipe with as well.
Yeah, I'll do the almond flour video link. And I'll post a picture of the Caldese's cookbook. There's actually 2 out already, and they're bringing a 3rd one out this March, I think. So now they've got the bug, they're producing them thick and fast. And the other cookbooks that can be useful, I'm not suggesting you have to go and buy loads of books at all, because there's lots on the internet, but Michael Mosley, who many of you will have seen on the television, he does lots of different medical programs, and he's the one that pioneered the 5-2 diet in the UK. And he's also done the blood sugar diet and the 800 calorie diet, which is based on some of the work that was done in Newcastle on rapid weight loss, which is achievable, but it's quite hard work because you have to stick to 800 calories a day for a few weeks. But in conjunction with that, his wife, who's a GP, has, with a food writer, written some really cracking cookbooks, and all the recipes in those are very easy but very tasty. I use quite a lot of those. So I can put the links for all these books on, and people can, the good thing about Amazon is you can have a good look at what the books appear to be like, and look at the reviews and things, and make up your minds whether the sort of thing you might use. So we can give you all of those.
Everybody's asking about probiotics, whether they're good.
Probiotics, yes. I mean, I will try and include a little bit about the microbiome. I mean, the problem is there is so much to talk about, and we've only got 6 weeks. You know, we'll try and dip into all of these. But what I want to do is sort of inspire you really to go away and do, you know, look at a lot of this stuff yourselves. But yes, probiotics are all helpful with the gut and having a healthy gut. We are now again learning more and more about how important that is for our overall health. And things like the fermented foods, kefir, and the kimchis and sauerkrauts and all of those sort of things, sprouted foods, they're all good at feeding the gut. Sorry?
Good with the sprouting, so she can probably
Yeah.
talk a bit about that as well.
So-
But I was also asking about high cholesterol, which I think you're going to cover in a future session, aren't you?
Well, we certainly can look at that. But, you know, dietary cholesterol is not an issue. People with high cholesterol, there's a lot of other things going on, but we have pretty much had enough evidence being accepted generally now that what we eat is not affecting our cholesterol levels. Things like eggs and animal fats that were you know, demonized for so long. There is general consensus now that you don't eat it and it doesn't just turn to fat and sludge up your arteries. As I've said right back at the beginning, what we're now learning is that inflammation is driving the changes in the arteries, to which cholesterol comes along as part of the repair mechanism. But it's the inflammation that caused the problem in the first place, and the inflammation is driven by the metabolic syndrome, which is driven by too much sugar in the blood and the release of too much insulin. So it all comes back to the carbs. So if you can get yourself onto a healthy whole food diet with a lower carb content, reduce that inflammation, very often the bad cholesterol, because there's a lot in a cholesterol profile, it's not all bad, but the bad cholesterol does improve if you get your diet right. So it's about eating the right things. But anyway, I'll let Dacia come in. Have you found the?
Well, yeah, I've put the I've
link
put
on.
two links. I've put the Dirty Dozen, the Clean 15, and I've also put a seed cracker recipe that I personally use. That's easy to do. But I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about the Dirty Dozen or the Clean 15.
Well, I think we've gone over time now anyway, so I think people want to have a look at those links, and then maybe next week we can come back to that.
I mean, you're all giving it a go, so that's really encouraging.
Yes.
You just have to sort of, you know, share recipes and encourage each other. You've got the WhatsApp group as well, so that
what I'd like to do is be as active as you can on the WhatsApp group. It's great to see some of the people's food and photographs and recipes and things that people are already trying, and if we've got, you know, just a few good cooks out there who are having success at maybe making some substitutions that can just give the others a little bit of a push to try themselves. As I said before, the aim for next week will be for me to do a lot less talking. I'll cover a few key things, but try and keep it short so that we can have more interaction, and maybe, you know, unmute a few of you so you can actually ask your questions. I've appreciated you doing it on the chat box so that we can get through a bit more the last 3 weeks, but we obviously want to make sure before we have our 2-week break after next week that you've kind of had as many questions answered as possible. And we'll try and be very proactive on the WhatsApp group this week. So do remember you can still ask questions on that.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Annabelle,
you.
you want to say anything?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It
That
was
was really useful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Especially thank you to Caroline and
Yes. Thank
Daksha
you.
and Davina.
Yeah.
We've got our vitamin C seminar on Tuesday, so please try and join us to learn more about vitamin C, which will also help you.
Yes.
And definitely you'll gain something out of it. Like we gained something last Tuesday on vitamin D. So that was great.
Yes, well, hopefully, I hope I didn't say anything to contradict that. But I mean, I think the speaker you had on, I've read quite a bit of his stuff, and he's very passionate about our frustration that the British, Public Health England particularly have been very sluggish in responding to the information about vitamin D.
Yeah, he does say that everyone should have vitamin D because of the country we're in. We're not going to get the vitamin D levels that we actually need.
No.
So, and we'll probably do another talk with him, but he does want us all to, try and do some sort of petition. So,
yeah, I know. Well,
that change. So
better late than never. But unfortunately, the amounts that they recommend from the NHS are very small, which for the summertime are probably okay, but through the winter. And particularly for vegans, I think, we need a lot more. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. But small changes are happening. So we're getting there.
True.
Who's doing the vitamin C talk?
A friend of my sister's, Graham Monroe Hall.
All right. No, I don't know him because I know, is it Patrick?
Patrick. I was asking if he knows Patrick. So.
No, I mean he's big guns these days, so I don't know whether you managed to get hold of him, but he's got a petition going about vitamin C.
Yeah, I'm going to put that on the invite.
Yeah, because there's quite a bit of good evidence to show that really helps your immune system when you're fighting an infection.
Hello.
So it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say. I'll see if I can.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I think
Can Daksha, would you mind putting all the links on the WhatsApp group?
No problem.
Please.
Those links that I've put on there, I'll put on the WhatsApp group. Please don't worry about that.
Which will be easier for everyone.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do that in
All
future, actually. And also, can I, as a final thing, can I just remind everyone to always keep the reason why they are wanting to make these changes at the forefront of the mind. Always remember your why. Is it because you want to spend time with your grandchildren? Is it because you want to fit into a certain outfit? Is it because you just want to be able to walk unaided in the future? What is driving you? Why do you want to do this for yourself? Don't forget that. That's really important.
Absolutely.
They said maybe keep it on a post-it in front of you, so you on the fridge or something, so you're reminded of that all the time.
Yeah, because it's so easy to forget why we have these goals.
It is, and unfortunately we're bombarded with messages about all the wrong stuff. So you're working, kind of going uphill all the time, I think, until you get more into it. Once you start really feeling the benefits, that's very helpful. But Daksha's absolutely right. You want to remember why you were inspired to do this in the first place.
And when you go shopping, just go with a list and don't go to any other naughty aisles. Otherwise, you get
Yeah, hopefully you'll be like us soon. I don't try to go to the supermarket as little as possible.
Yeah,
but when I do, I just walk in the door and go, oh, because it's just shelves and shelves of all the wrong stuff right in front of you as you walk in the door, and they're all desperate to get you to buy all the rubbish. So we want you all to be like that.
I get claustrophobic, so I don't go shopping at all.
Oh,
well, that's good. Then you're only buying what you need. And hopefully you're only shopping online when you're full and not hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. We shall meet hopefully Tuesday and then Friday again. So I look forward again. Lovely. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe and stay warm.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Warmer
Thank
next
you.
week.
Thank
It's
you.
too
Okay.
cold. It's
Yeah.
too cold.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Karen.
Thank you.
Dasha and Devina.
Bye. Take
Bye.
care.
Take
Thank
care all.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.